It includes, of course, social media, as we all know, Facebook and the other, MAFA, as they call it very often. The media are not trusted very much. You should be aware of it.
네, 언론도요, 신뢰도가 높지 않습니다. 많은 경우에 언론을 믿지 않습니다.
But where do we get our information from?
그럼 정보는 어디서 얻어요?
It's very rare that we directly talk to a politician, somebody who represents us in parliament or even in the government. It's very rare we have direct contact. We depend on the media. The word media says it already.
근데 문제는 뭐냐면은 정치인을 우리가 직접적으로 컨택을 해갖고 그 사람한테 물어보면 좋겠지만은 정치인들을 직접 만날 수가 없으니까 우리가 정보를 얻는 것은 언론인데 그 언론을 신뢰하지 않는 지금 상태라는 겁니다. 그러니까 정보라고 하는 것이 정확하게 전달이 될 수가 없는 상황입니다.
I'm talking here about a representative survey of 65 worldwide countries. So you have included countries like China, most communist countries, Vietnam. We have as well European countries included. We have the Scandinavians, which are supposed the most democratic countries and the most transparent countries. You have the United States. All these are included in the survey. It's interesting that the highest level in ethical terms of trust is with civil society, NGOs, non-governmental organizations.
놀라운 것이 발견이요. 이게 이제 65개국을 대상으로 서베이를 한 건데 거기에는 공화권도 있고 자유권도 있고 유럽, 미국 다 포함되어 있습니다. 그 서베이를 통해서 관찰이 된 것은 실제로 어떤 영역이 가장 신뢰할 수 있는다라고 했을 때 타 영역이지라, 그러니까 NGO하고, 그러니까 비정부 영역하고 사기업 영역이 오히려 더 신뢰할 수 있는 영역이다. 그렇게 결과가 나옵니다.
It's quite interesting as well that business is very highly rated in competence. In a very simple way, because we every day when we buy something, we give a vote in favor of a business because we decide we like this product more than the other, showing that we have a preference. And this is a vote, and very much in politics we have this kind of voting as well.
이제 경쟁력이라는 것을 봤을 때 우리가 정치에서도 투표를 하잖아요. 그것과 마찬가지로 실제 밸런스 던지지는 않지만은 기업들에 대해서 투표하는 거랑 마찬가지예요. 왜냐하면 기업이 만드는 제품에 대해서 선호도를 갖고 내가 살 것이냐 안 살 것이냐를 결정하니까 그게 일종의 투표라는 이제 개념이라는 겁니다. 그런 게 있기 때문에 실제로 경쟁력이라든지 신뢰도에 있어서 비즈니스가 차지하는 것이 훨씬 높습니다.
In very simple terms, when we buy a car or even food, it's a vote every day what preference we give. And if we lose trust in a product, in a brand, this very often translates already a couple of days later into the sinking profit of that company.
왜 경쟁력이 높고 신뢰도가 높을 수밖에 없는가는 비즈니스에서 만들어낸 제품들이 경쟁력이 없으면은 국내력도 없어지잖아요. 그러니까 불가피하게 그럴 수밖에 없습니다.
So I just want to emphasize the idea of NGOs in contrast to the nations, because NGOs unfortunately still have to be registered in a nation. There is no international or interpopular registry beyond the nation. So we all are more or less controlled by the nation. If you work with Greenpeace, whatever, they are nationally registered only. That's one of the problems.
지금 이제 저는 NGO의 가치에 대해서 말을 하려고 하는데 사실 NGO도 국가에 속해 있는 건 사실이죠. 왜냐하면 국내법에 따라서 등록을 해야 되고 그렇게 되니까 이제 그 NGO라고 하는 비정부 기구도 이제 국가에 소속돼 있는 것은 사실입니다. 그렇지만은 그것은 일종의 좀 부정적인 측면이고 이제 NGO 자기가 지금 말하려고 하는 NGO의 가치는 그거보다 훨씬 강력한 것입니다.
But NGOs, the civil society groups, they are only having voices, be it in the media or at COP. We are aware of BLM recently, the conference or the convention of the climate issues, which was in Brazil recently. These groups are only privately organized. They are interpopular when they are going across borders. these are very much, in my understanding, the interpopular relationship between people and the higher level of governance, like global governance, United Nations, in Europe as well. Beyond the nation, we have unfortunately no organization as such, but they have a voice there.
이제 우리가 지금 작동되고 있는 것, NGO라고 하는 것이 작동되고 있는 것을 보면은 아까 말한 것처럼 국내법의 제한을 받지만은 실제 NGO들이 작동하는 그 현상을 보면은 투표를 통해서 국제법에 영향을 미칠 수는 없지만 보이스를 통해 가지고서 국경을 넘어선 협력을 많이 하고 있고 그것은 이미 상당한 영향력을 갖고 형성이 되어 있어요. 예를 들면 팝이라고 하는 그 기후변화 컨퍼런스 있잖아요. 거기서 우리가 국제법상의 투표를 하는 건 아니지만은 이제 그러한 NGO들 간의 협력 체계가 실제 국제적 맥락에 영향을 미치고 있다.
So the NGOs are not with a quantity of votes like nations, they are only with a quality of voices.
그래서 투표라고 하는 양적인 수단을 통해 가지고 영향을 미치는 게 아니라 보이스라는 것을 통해 가지고 질적으로 영향을 미치는 방식.
And that's what I call moving from multilateralism, multi meaning many, to omnilateralism, meaning all, being represented not only by national identity, but as well on the subject by civil society, NGOs at higher level of governance.
그래서 제가 이제부터 자기가 이제 왜 신조어를 지금 말하는가 게 거기서 나온 겁니다. 그러니까 omnilateralism이라는 것은 multilateralism이라고 하는 국가 간 다자주의에 대한 그 대체말이에요. 대체말이다. 그래서 이제 국가라고 하는 그 국가 간 다자 협력 체계가 있지만은 그것만 가지고서는 안 되고, 그러니까 시민사회의 그 국제적 협력 구조가 실제로 상위의 의사결정 구조에 참여할 수 있는 그런 새로운 구조를 제안하고 있는 것입니다.
So from interpopularity between people, not only between nations, you create omnilateralism. That means all are included, not only the nations as such, to decide at the highest level of governance, which is United Nations global governance. That's what I call omnilateralism. There already I have a word in Wikipedia if you want to look it up.
이제 국제관계에 있어서의 최상위 구조가 이제 UN이라고 할 수가 있는데, 이제 그러면은 UN의 의사결정 구조를 옴니레터럴하게 지금까지는 국가만 대표성을 갖고 참여를 했는데 시민사회 NGO들이 그러면 그 정도의 영향을 가지고 참여할 수 있는 구조를 만들자는 제안입니다.
So to put the people really into democracy at all levels of governance, particularly global governance, to represent we the people, I think it should be omnilateral, not only multilateral, including all the civil society representatives and not only nations.
그래서 국가 간 다자주의는 더 이상 작동하지 않는다. 그러니까 국가 간 다자주의를 넘어선 그러니까 omnilateral democracy, 그것이 중요한 대안이 될 것입니다.
If you are interested, I can send you my book in digital form on omnilateralism, where all the details and the arguments are repeated. Sorry to be so long. 고맙습니다.
감사합니다. 그 자료가 필요하시면은 PDF 자료를 보내드리겠습니다.
Certainly, I'm open to any questions, particular critical questions.
네, 뭐 질문 있으면.
네, 질문.
제가 먼저 질문합니다. 이제 아까 되게 인상 깊은 얘기가 있는데, 국가는 전쟁을 불러오고 시민사회는 평화를 부른다, 이런 말씀을 하셨는데, 그렇다면 이제 유럽에서 유고슬라비아 사례는 어떻게 되는 건지. 유고슬라비아라는 연방 국가가 무너지고 난 다음에 코소보 전투가 왔잖아요. 근데 그 유고슬라비아 안에서 실제로 많은 협력들을 거나 진행해 왔는데 그것이 아니었다라는 게 유고슬라비아 붕괴 이후에 실제로 나타난 코소보 전쟁에서 나타났어요. 여러 다민족 사회 집단들은 왜 그러면 이런 멀티 레벨 수준의 교육을 없는 거야? 한번 그거에 대해서 좀 궁금합니다. 그건 지금 이런 흐름에서 해석이 잘 안 될 수 있는 거죠.
Yes, and it was quite interesting that you said that nations lead to war and civil society promotes peace. What about the case of Yugoslavia? They are multi-ethnic nation, but it was led to a Kosovo war. Then big promise that you have kept is different in this. So how would you explain?
There's, of course, history behind it. Yugoslavia at the time was under Tito. Tito was very much engaged in political issues, East, West, whatever. He tried to find some kind of neutral way. He was part of the Development Bandung Conference in the 1950s, you might remember, where they find between the Cold War sides of Soviet Union, United States, the West and the East, some kind of neutral third way, the Bandung Conference 55. And there, of course, this new way internationally created some kind of ethnic consciousness within Yugoslavia, which didn't bring them together, but found some kind of ethnic independence. We have that as well within Europe nowadays. Look at Scotland. Scotland, there's a vote on what they call independence, which as a European I say it's nonsense. There is no nation which is independent. Even North Korea, I dare say, are depending on others. There is no nation can survive completely secluded from the rest of the world. It's not possible, because we're all trading already. That's what I call interpopular relations go on. I know North Korea is a particular case at the moment still, but we had similar cases, East-West Germany, you know. So the thing for me is Yugoslavia was split because there was some kind of reaction to coming together in a higher level. And it's interesting if you look at, you mentioned Kosovo, if I understood you correctly, and this Tamin Soko, the multinationality. This is an issue because we don't have a clear definition what a nation is. Is Kosovo a nation or not? They try to be a member state, not nation, we don't use the word nation in Europe anymore, of the United Europe. So people want to come together at a higher level. This is easily done economically because we all see the advantages of economic exchange. That's Ricardo going back, the advantage in trade, comparative advantage in giving and taking, so different products. Going back to the relation between England at the time with Portugal. Portugal was easily producing wine which the British didn't know, and the British exported to Portugal textile because they had the Industrial Revolution starting already. So differences created trade that was very productive, and this is still the case nowadays. We change because we have differences, and that's positive. But I go as far as saying biodiversity is very fertile, it's very productive, because there are differences. And if we cooperate over differences, that can be very positive. And this was seen more and more in Europe now as well. That's why we come together to communicate over differences. Cultural differences in Europe are very important. We call it always the union of diversity. And this, I think, in East Asia as well. You trade with China and Japan because there are different products which everybody wants to have on the other side. And you learn from each other. This is what I call interpopular relations, helping to improve the economy, to improve lifestyle of people. It's for the people.
Yeah.
I don't want to go into details on Yugoslavia. I'm not an expert, I admit.
자기가 유고의 전문가는 아니지만은 그 당시 티토가 유고를 통치하면서 그 당시에 비동맹 노선에 많은 관심을 하고 반중회의라든지 중립적 노선을 취하게 되면서 그 당시 그 유고슬라비아 안에서 그것이 말하자면 한쪽으로 너무 치우치니까는 어떤 분리운동, 독립운동 같은 경향이 강했다. 그러니까 그것은 그 연합 체계에 대해서 그것이 이제 긍정적인 측면이 많음에도 불구하고 항상 그 부정적인 반작용이 일어난 사례로 생각하는 것 같습니다. 예를 들어서 요즘에 스코틀랜드도 이제 독립운동을 하고 참 그렇게 국가로서 국가선언을 이제 하고 싶어 하잖아요. 근데 이제 한 국가로서 유럽연합에 참여해가지고 경제적인 인센티브를 누리고 여러 이제 그 경제적 거래를 통해서 유익을 얻는 그런 것이 긍정적으로 작용을 해야 되는데 그 부정적인 말하자면 국가주의로 흐르는 경향이 있다. 지금 유럽도 그렇기 때문에 유럽이 긍정적인 경향을 분명히 가지고 있지만 내부적으로 보면은 동시에 분리적인 운동이 있는 것과 같은 것이다. 그래서 유고 문제는 그렇게 좀 알아봐야 될 것이 아닌가. 그렇게 말한 것 같습니다.
May I just add one word? You might remember that Czechoslovakia was one nation. They divided. It was easy because both were part of the European Union. So they knew there was no problem. There wouldn't be a border. It's not an ethnic conflict either. It was more a political issue between these two. But they had the common denominator of European Union at a higher level. It was easy, was accepted by everybody. That's why I am, for instance, against Scotland being a member as such, as a nation. But they should be more regarded what we call region. We have so-called Council of the Region, where Catalonia is as well represented as Bavaria and Germany. And I'm fully aware, for instance, of Okinawa being quite different from Honshu in Japan. These regional identities are much stronger than national identities very often. Even in Germany, most of the Germans identify rather than with a nation, with a region. We call them now federal Länder, lands. But regional identity is much more cultural based, even ethnic based in most cases. But on the other hand, very simply said, we are all migrants. We are all out of Africa, as we say in Europe. Homo sapiens comes from Africa and then went north. I myself, from my name actually, I'm more French than German. So if you look at your history of your family, I'm sure there's some movement somewhere over borders, which is part of your family ethnic background.
그래서 국가라고 하는 해결책보다는 예를 들면 체코슬로바키아 같은 경우는 조금 자기는 긍정적으로 본 것 같고요. 왜냐하면 그것은 슬로바니아하고 국가가 나눠졌지만 동시에 유럽연합에 참여하게 됨으로써 이제 해결책을 봤다. 이제 그런 측면에서 그건 좀 좋게 보고 있고 자기가 볼 때 스코틀랜드 같은 경우가 카탈로니아 같은 경우에 국가로서 독립하는 것보다는 위전으로 그러니까 지역으로 독립성을 인정하면서 그 시민사회의 자연적 정체성을 살려주는 것이 독립국가가 되는 것보다는 더 낫고 그런 점에서 좀 이런 더 파퓰러한 그 개념을 거기에 적용해가지고 그들의 그 독립적 어떤 그것을 그러니까 역학을 살려주면서 꼭 국가로서 통합되도록 하지 않는 그러니까 단일 국가로서 만들어지는 것은 아닌 방법이 자기는 좋겠다고 생각하는 것 같습니다.
뭐 질문 또 있으신가요? 하나만 제가 더 추가를 한일 관계로 그래서 이제 인터 파퓰러적인 개념에서 슈어리즘 이런 얘기를 많이 하셨는데 거기서 이제 한일 관계에서 한국은 일본이 제일 많이 관광을 갑니다. 800만 명 가요. 그래서 한일 관계는 민간 교류로 볼 때는 큰 이상이 없는데 정치적으로는 일본이 과거사 문제를 사과하는 건 너무 잘하는 사실인데 그게 2018년 한반도 평화 프로세스가 재개됐을 때 느닷없이 일본 정부가 북한과 남한이 친해진다고 해가지고 무역 제재를 갖다 했어요. 그래가지고 핵심적인 반도체 관련된 물질들을 무역 제재를 통해서 수출을 하지 않았는데 우리나라에 그런 일들이 생기는 것은 뭐냐면 인터파퓰러한 측면도 일정하게 국제사회 발전에 기여도 하지만 인터내셔널한 그런 측면에서 해결돼야 될 과제들이 분명히 있다. 그래서 이것을 인터내셔널의 한계로 인터파퓰러를 포기하잖아. 인터내셔널과 인터파퓰러를 조화롭게 좀 보면서 발전해 나가야 되는 거 아니냐. 그게 물론 인터파퓰러라는 개념이 인터내셔널을 포괄하는 개념일 수도 있겠지만 어쨌든 그런 걸 좀 고민할 필요가 있지 않을까.
He is saying that international and interpopular should be a complementary concept, not exclusive to each other. For example, in Korea and Japanese relations, like decades ago, there was a political issue being emerged because interpopular relations between two countries was pretty good. So, we don't have a people-to-people relations in many different spheres. But what happened is when Japan saw that South and North Korean relations is being improved, so the Japanese government imposed the sanctions on semiconductor areas, and so the international trade between Japan and South Korea was pretty much reduced since that time. So he thinks that yes, interpopular relations is important and must be promoted, but at the same time, international components are also important because it would affect the interpopular relations. So it must be complementary to each other. Even though he may think that interpopular include an international component in it.
This is an excellent question. I'm very thankful for that because it gives me a chance to bring in my own experience as a diplomat in Japan. You might remember the soccer championship, world championship, when international FIFA, the International Federation of Football, was imposing, on Japan to cooperate with South Korea. I was in Japan, that's the view of Japanese. I don't know if South Korea saw it as a compliment or you felt imposed as well. The Japanese, I would say the most Japanese, particularly at official level, saw that as an imposition. They didn't feel at ease in the beginning. But they imposed more or less internationally, it was governmental agreement in the end, that there was a framework, a treaty between Korea government and Japanese government to accept that both together would organize the football championship. And then, particularly the football players, they are private persons. And they are working in contract with their companies, whatever. But when they are representing the nation, it's international. So the championship itself was international. But the organization, you had to organize even your stadium and all that, sell tickets and all that. That is private law, that's interpopular. The Japanese came here as spectators to see the football players here, and you probably, Koreans, you went to Japan. That was interpopular. So it just shows that the international treaty puts up a framework which allows interpopular relations. And that's exactly the problem for me, because at the higher level, the international treaty very often restricts these exchanges instead of opening up the possibilities. And I dare say, as a non-Japanese, having been in Japan already as a student, I'm very much aware of how much the lack of interpopulations between Japan and Korea restricted really the understanding of each other. Mutual understanding was very low. The Japanese were very much against everything coming from Korea. And even nowadays, look how few cars from Korea are in Japan. That's not a problem of international, it's a problem of interpopular, because people still have so many prejudices of the historic view. And even from here to Japan, there's still some prejudice there, I say. We have the same in Europe. We had long time between France and Germany after the Second World War, prejudice. I came to France first time as a student at the age of 16, and I was surprised on the cemetery to see so many German names. And I started asking myself, what were Germans doing here? And then they explained to me, yes, they were soldiers, they were killing the French. I was shocked. All of a sudden I felt myself as a German being represented on the cemetery. It was quite an experience, to be honest, because I felt as a German having responsibility, although obviously I was a different generation. But nevertheless, this understanding is only possible if you exchange, and that's why I want to have more interpopular exchange. The government to exchange, to have treaties, takes so much time, it's so complicated. As a diplomat, I had so many problems. I was negotiating with your countrymen the free trade agreement between the EU and Korea. And to be very honest with you, I don't see equality there, because we are representing 27 countries there, and we are highly qualified as experts for FTAs. But on the Korean side, you had to bring in the academics to help the official negotiators. So it's very difficult to have really equal weights in international relations. But in private relations, I think it's much better to talk to each other at an equal level between individuals. And that is interpopularity for me. Thank you for that question. That's very
아주 중요한 문제를 제기해 주신 것에 대해서 감사드리고 또 교수님께서 하신 말씀이 지당하신 말씀이고 또 한일 관계 자기들이 일본의 EU 대사로서 있으면서 그 2002년 월컵에서 그 국제 사회가 양쪽 국가가 같이 동시에 하도록 하는 것을 국제 사회가 조금 이렇게 강제적인 조금 그런 측면이 있었던 것 같아가지고 좀 반응이 있었던 것 같고요. 그리고 이제 유럽 사회에서도 비슷한 사례들이 나타나는데 간단하게 이제 어떤 경우에는 시민 사회가 제약이 되는 경우도 있고요. 또 어떤 경우는 이제 정부 섹터가 제약이 되는 경우도 있고, 그러니까 서로 이렇게 상호적인 노력을 해야 된다고 생각합니다.
마이크 없어요.
일본어 때문에 있거든.
하고 말을
작으시면 여기 나 마이크를 갖다
아니 됐어요. 목소리 큽니다. 오늘 선생님 말씀하신 거 대단히 감명 깊게 들었습니다. 매우 좋은 말씀이고 지당한 말씀이긴 한데 다만 약간 질문을 위해서 사실은 이상적으로는 좋은데 지금 현실은 한편 거꾸로 가는 그런 측면이 있어서 그러니까 지금 이미 세계는 인터포퓰레리티가 필요한 그리고 그게 진행 중인 그런 시절에 들어가 있는데 아까도 질문하셨지만 국가와 국가 간의 관계는 여전히 내셔널리즘이 팽배하고 더욱이 요즘 트럼프 정권이 들어서가지고 각 나라들이 오히려 지금 각자 도생을 해야 된다. 19세기 말로 돌아가는 거 아니냐 하는 그러한 엇갈리는 현상이 동시에 벌어지고 있습니다. 이러한 점에 대해서 어떻게 생각하시는지, 이걸 어떻게 극복해야 되는지. 그 다음에 두 번째는 EU의 앞날입니다. EU가 지역 리저널 인테그레이션의 아주 모범적인 케이스인데 이 케이스가 지금 앞으로 더욱더 발전이 되고 지구적으로 확산이 될 것인지 아니면 EU의 앞날에도 문제점이 지금 많아서 자칫하면 거꾸로 유럽의 분열, 콘서트가 아니라 디스인테그레이션이 벌어지는 그런 사태는 오지 않을지 좀 두 가지 질문을 드려봅니다.
Thank you for your active lecture that's given to us today, which looks quite ideal. But when I take a look at the reality today, it's going backward. So, for example, like an interpopularity between the peoples are significant and important. But at the moment, especially under Trump administration in international relations, each state has to be responsible for their own destiny. So international cooperation or coalition is now being reduced. So how the nations can overcome through the concepts that you have presented, interpopularity, omnilateralism, all those concepts, how that can be at work to overcome these obstacles. And number two, the future of European Union. Now, EU is one of the good models of regional integration, but for the future, can we see the good developments, from today? Is it a continued model of regional integration, or because of different dynamics at work, the Europe will be disintegrated rather than integrated?
Now I feel insulted. Sorry. No, I think you're very to the point with the question. Donald Trump, I shouldn't say it in a country which has a precedent itself. I'm against democracy by precedents at level. Because I feel any country with a precedent giving one person directly a mandate by the people without control of parliament is a dangerous place. If you look at all the precedents, which we call precedents in the world, you have Trump, you have Putin, you have Erdogan, Turkey, you have Xi, I don't mention South Korea. These people who have a direct mandate are very dangerous. And see, Duterte, for instance, he's still at the International Court in Den Haag. He was president of the Philippines, but he, not only against internal law, he violated international law. He violated the basic concept of what the United States Charter says by criminal gangs bringing together, and the way he dealt with. It's against the rule of law in very simple terms. And other presidents, I don't want to get into the history of your own country here, there are delicate issues with presidents. And for me, this kind of level, what some people in politology call filters, is very important. Parliaments are filters. They represent more directly the people to control at the highest level, which is a government at national level. And this we don't have very little at global level, unfortunately. And with Trump, it's the extreme case of a presidential system. He's using executive orders because there's no control of Congress in that case. So he just signs whatever he wants, shows it to the public, and he gets the attention. And nowadays, unfortunately, in our, I call it capitalist society, this kind of attention economy is enough. If it's good or bad what he does is secondary. He gets attention and he gets votes that way. I hope it will change in November, but this is still open, unfortunately. I'm afraid he will even avoid to have elections at that time. But presidential systems to start with are dangerous for me. So the future being seen only by the American example of Trump is very pessimistic to feel. But on the other hand, I believe in democracy, and I hope that in November there will be changes in the US. And in Europe, we feel already a negative influence for the rightists, because very often, even the German AfD, Alternative für Deutschland, the rightist extreme parties, they see problems in identifying with Trump. For a long time, they tried to support him, and the Americans even influenced and partly financed rightist parties in Europe. This has changed. The European parties, even the rightists, don't want to associate with Trump anymore. So there's a negative example of the development in the United States. And I dare say, and this is for me a very recent study, in the Financial Times, they show that AI, artificial intelligence, in contrast to what is called the social media, is more and more having an influence to moderate the extremes. Because in the social media, you were looking into the internet to find somebody else who had the same opinion, to confirm your extreme opinion. Whereas now with AI sees the whole of the internet knowledge, with all its limits. Certainly there are lots of mistakes, errors in AI. But on the other hand, it seems to be more comprehensive in the information you get. And there's a tendency, at least according to the survey done by the Financial Times, that artificial intelligence will reduce the extremes and there will be more stability to the middle ground. And I think this in the long term can have even influence on politics. So I'm optimistic in that sense. But I admit entirely Trump is a negative example. To your second question, I can later. Okay.
예, 지금 자기가 개인적으로는 대통령에게 권한이 지나치게 집중돼 있는 그 제도 자체에 대해서 자기는 선호하지 않는다고 합니다. 예를 들어서 터키 에르도안이라든지 뭐 중국, 지금 이제 미국 마셔서고 필리핀의 두테르테라든지 러시아의 푸틴, 우리나라도 자기가 말을 못하지만은 그런 것 자체가 대통령이 지나치게 권력이 집중되어 있는 구조 때문에 필터가 없이, 여과 없이 이루어지는 그 현상이 문제가 있고, 이제 미국은 이제 행정명령이라는 그 제도를 통해 가지고 트럼프가 상당히 일방적으로 정책을 펼치고 있고, 그 다음에 이제 경제 중심주의적 정책을 하면서 이제 대중적 어텐션을 이렇게 받다 보니까 제도 자체가 좀 문제가 있는 것 같습니다. 유럽도 이제 유사 우파라고 하는 게 있는데 그 유럽에서 그 유사 우파가 이제 트럼프하고 계속 연계 관계를 유지하다가 요즘 유럽에는 오히려 트럼프하고 조금 이렇게 거리를 둬야 된다는 우파 진영의 움직임이 있다고 합니다. 그래서 이제 그런 본질적인 대통령 중심의 문제가 있다는 것을 말씀드리면서 요즘 나오고 있는 것이 이제 기술을 활용한 중립성의 확보거든요. 그러니까 소셜 미디어는 좀 중립성은 어긋날 때가 많이 있잖아요. 근데 이제 AI는 실제로 포괄성이라든지 이런 정보적 중립성이 오히려 좀 많이 담보가 되는 경향이 있고, 그래서 파이낸셜 타임스 같은 데는 앞으로의 미래, 그러니까 중립성의 미래를 AI라는 기술에서 찾는 경향도 있다고 합니다.
Second question, you mentioned the EU. You said there might be disintegration because of developments as you see it. I give you all the credit that there's a problem with nationalism. I mentioned already the German case. It's even more dangerous, and here we go again against the presidential system in France. They have a president, and even Macron used, when he had conflict with some issues on pension reform, that there was no parliamentary majority behind him, and he kind of used what they call in France the Article 49, in order to have some kind of executive order system to rule. But the problem in Europe is, and there I'm again optimistic, that we see the outside examples. And for me, as a European, the shock was in 2016. We had Brexit, British exit from the EU, which was really a shock, very clearly. That the majority of British voters wanted to get out, with all the problems, how that vote was created and how the majority, Boris Johnson, all that aside, just the people voted against Europe. This was a great shock for me. Although this is an island and I'm living on the continent, fortunately. But it was a shock. And then 2016 as well, Trump was elected. So for me, this was the Anglo-Saxon double shock of the year, in very simple terms. But it's interesting how Brexit brought the 27 left in the EU more together than before. Because we realized, when the British went out and the problems they have even nowadays, economic problems, the people, majority are clearly against Brexit now in the UK. It's very clear. If there would be a vote already now, it changes. Let's see the future generations. The young people were already in favor of Europe before, but if they are coming into the voters' masses to decide, I'm very positive that the UK will try again to join us. So this shock from the outside brought us together. And it's the same with Trump. Look at Greenland. I couldn't believe it in the beginning that all the others would join Denmark in defending Greenland politically. The EU came together. And that's a little bit the experience, historic experience of the EU. In crisis situations, you go to the EU in Europe now.
예,
It was the same in COVID. I can explain that if you want.
예, 이미 이제 말씀드린 국가주의라든지 예, 대통령 중심주의 이것이 이제 행정 명령 제도를 통해 가지고 오염되고 있는 것을 말씀드렸고요. 유럽의 경우는 자기 희망적이라고 보는데 2016